You're not even chilly.
I'm an Icelander, you frost-bitten baboon.
Hey guys, my name's DocJade. Welcome back to Factorio Space Age. Today we are acclimating to Aquilo. Surrounding us on this ice island is yet more ice, and an ocean of ammoniacal solution, which I had to look up how to pronounce. Before we can build anything though, we're going to need some concrete to build on top of the ice, which I forgot to bring with me. Thankfully, back over at Recycling Central, we can get plenty of concrete from scrap, but there's no scrap to be had due to my unparalleled train signaling skills. While waiting on that, I took a closer look at the resources on Aquilo. Mining the ice gives you ice, of course, along with lithium and ice platforms, and we also unlocked lithium processing. Lithium is made from holmium plates, lithium brine, and ammonia, and turning it into plates just takes good old-fashioned fire in a box. I'll load up Rocket Man with a lot of holmium plates. Good thing I overbuilt production for it. Also, concrete wasn't getting launched up. Turns out I never put it by the silo. Still waiting on Rocket Man to get back, I guess I'll clean up the ice. I also started gambling for better quality modules, since I plan on using quite a few later. Quality 3 modules as well. Fulgora has finally woken up, and a few launches later, down goes all the building supplies. I was expecting Aquilo to debuff bots at least a little, but not quite this hard. One trip to pick up items is enough to drain their batteries entirely. Looks like I'll be building a lot of things by hand, but at least they're still faster than hand mining the ice. First up on the to-do list is making some lithium plates, since that'll unlock whatever this thing is. Down goes an electric furnace and... oh yeah, how does freezing work? The heating tower turns burnable stuff into, well, heat, and then using heat pipes, you can thaw buildings. 2 questions. Question 1, how do I make a heating tower? And question 2, where am I going to get the fuel from? Heating towers aren't too expensive, but unfortunately I didn't bring a single rock of stone with me. You kidding me? I left it all on the ship, which is busy picking up more concrete. But while it's on errands, might as well grab some more building supplies. After a lot of waiting, stone. Wait, heat pipes. Shoot, I don't have any of those either. I'll make them on Vulcanus. Eventually, there's a heating tower. Now we can finally warm up that furnace. The heating tower will burn just about anything, but all I've got with me right now is some coal, which it absolutely whips through. A whole stack barely warms it up. As for a way to power everything, solar is so bad out here that we'll have to use steam power, which luckily I did bring some heat exchangers and turbines for. But we'll need water for that, which I'm not sure how to automate yet, but we do have a decent stockpile of it from mining earlier, so we'll use that. After a bit of paving and a very strange turbine setup later, I started heating up the heat exchangers and turbines. With a solar panel to power the ice melting, it produces a pitiful 600 watts. Guess I'll move the ice by hand. Oh boy. Finally getting around to question 2. Unless I can figure out a way to make Aquilo power itself, I'll have to ship in rocket fuel. With the ice melted, now we need to heat up the heat exchangers, which don't work until they hit 500 degrees. Well, we do have oil, so we could try making solid fuel. After smelting some bricks for an oil refinery in a stone furnace, and completely failing to realize that I could just smelt the lithium the same way, I'll make room for the oil setup, which, as to be expected, was also very slow. Why did I only bring 3 solar panels? One test of patience later, the oil is pumped, if you can even call it that, and into the refinery it goes. Luckily, whatever drugs I was on wore off, and critical thinking kicked in, which finally made me realize that I could just use a regular boiler instead of a heat exchanger. With the oil setup running at full speed, it's not fast enough to keep this heating tower fed. So back to coal I go, and I inexplicably replaced the boiler with a heat exchanger again, which I managed to heat up about halfway. Needing more fuel for heat, I started making carbon on Rocket Man to send down and burn. And with a kickstart from a second boiler, I managed to make solid fuel self-sustaining. Just kidding. More materials and fuel later, we finally hit 500 degrees. I think my rationale for rushing heat exchangers so early was to try and save on ice by getting more power per unit of water, but seriously, I should have just used regular boilers instead of waiting around for several hours. With an electric furnace, hot and ready like Little Caesars, out comes our first silver pie, and we unlock the cryogenic plant. It says the cryo plant can handle, and I quote, extremely low temperatures. Finally, a building that I don't have to heat up. But I will have to ship in supercapacitors and refined concrete for it, both of which I thankfully already make on Fulgora. Rocket Man can make carbon pretty quickly, and while it might not be very energy dense, it is free. This gives me a fun and dumb idea. We'll circle back to it later. Right now I want to fully automate making lithium, for which I'll need ammonia, which you can seize by separating it out from the surrounding sea solution. In goes the mighty offshore pump, which can handle everything from sub-zero temperature oceans to over 1,000-degree lava, all for the low price of 7 iron plates. After building a crock pot to keep it warm in, we can use the chemical plant to separate the solution into ice and ammonia. Looks like I was rationing ice for no reason. Using the ammonia, there's an alternate solid fuel recipe and a rocket fuel recipe. Finally, the answer to question 2. I'll send over the ice to be melted, then we can look at the next lithium ingredient, lithium brine, which is collected with a pump jack from deposits in the ice. I saw a vent to the right, but this is fluorine, which I'm guessing we'll also need, but a quick search reveals a brine deposit up north, which has an amount instead of a percentage, a limited fluid resource. Interesting. Since we'll need to heat up the pump jacks, we'll have to run a heat pipe up there. I'm out of ice platforms, but they're easy to make, just ammonia and ice, although it is quite slow. In goes the jacks, and then the heat pipe, which I'm not sure if I'll be able to heat something up that's so far away, but only one way to find out. With a heating tower to speed it up a bit, it looks like it'll reach just fine, which means central heating should be viable, instead of having to space out a bunch of heating towers all over the place. Connecting the pipes and heating everything was quite the puzzle, but that's brine. The pump jacks only pump one fluid unit at a time. I'll stockpile a tank of it for later. This might end up being our bottleneck. Finally, our supercapacitors arrive, and we can make our first cryo plant. But before that, I'll ship down some more carbon to help speed up heating everything up. A losing quality gamble later. That's our first cryogenic plant, which also unlocked the science pack. Quite a bit earlier than I was expecting, but okay. Oh, so it can't handle extremely low temperatures. Okay then, let's take a look at the science. Oh, 3 ingredients. This seems suspiciously simple. I have no idea what fluoroketone is though. The plant also has 8 module slots, which we can leverage to make quite a few quality plants. Making the science also outputs hot fluoroketone, a hot side and a cold side. This seems familiar. With some holmium, ammonia, and our hero brine, I'll make some lithium and more cryo plants. Now, before I tackle the science, I do feel pretty cramped on space already, so I automated platform production. With speed modules, the cryo plants filter out ice at a ludicrous speed. So in goes more assemblers, which destroys our power satisfaction. Burning carbon is working pretty well though, so adding more heat exchangers wasn't an issue. Maybe we could run everything off of carbon. With this epic cryogenic plant, we're printing ice faster than the Venezuelan Bolivar. Even upgrading to stack inserters can't keep up. Downgrading the plant makes the speeds a bit more reasonable. But why have one small production line when you can have slightly more than one? Then double that. Making ice platforms is pretty darn cheap though, so let's double it again! Time for more power production, and carbon's been working pretty well so far, so I'll scale it up just a bit more. In fact, why even make solid fuel or rocket fuel? Let's just go all in on carbon. I'm sure going for the fun, gimmicky solution won't cause any issues whatsoever. Carbano will be our carbon harvesting platform. To keep the size down, I'll forego making ammo, and just shoot all of the asteroids with rockets. After upgrading the outdated Automo, I built some pretty compact explosive and rocket production. I read online that skinnier ships have less drag and thus are easier to make thrust for, so I'm going to make a long and skinny ship this time. My vast experience with spaghetti and ribbon worlds comes in handy here. Then iron, water, and then finally a nuclear power plant to power everything. I'll stack it all together, add turrets to the front, walls on the sides, and voila! I'm pinning my entire heat and power production on this ship, so it better work. Starting it up is going to take quite a while, though. Wait a second. Gleba is out of eggs. I am not going back there, but I have an idea.
Oh, this is gonna be so stupid.
Just like you can remote drive trains, you can also remotely drive tanks, no matter where you are in the universe. And with the equipment grid, you can make tanks pretty beefy now. I don't usually use discharge defense. In fact, I can't remember ever using it, but I've heard it's good for the little pentapods, so I'll give it a shot. One outsourced driver later, David starts heading over to the nearest nest, but he doesn't have his own radar coverage, so time for some radar leapfrog. Once David reached the target area, he used a couple fancy rocks to take down Goliath, and ran home with the eggs. Back on Carbano, we're still waiting for asteroids to kickstart the engines, and I forgot to send Rocket Man back to Aquilo, which subsequently ran out of carbon and froze over. We've made quite a lot of ice platforms so far, and at the rate we can make them, might as well go for gold and build a massive platform. I'll rasterize and place it in the background. Carbano is finally starting to move. But I forgot that the smaller asteroids have a higher explosion resistance, so it takes 4 rockets to take out 1 medium asteroid. Not exactly cost effective. Luckily, I had already belted iron up to the front, so retrofitting ammo production in was easy. Collecting asteroids to move again ended up taking so long that I just sent up ice from Navis to get things going. While the turrets are handling themselves nicely, I wish there was a way that I could make them aim forwards, so I didn't waste as many rockets on the sides, but oh well. Pretty quickly, carbon production is up to speed. But will Carbano actually reach Aquilo? Well, no. So many rockets got wasted on the sides that it ran out of fuel and started drifting back. So in goes side collection. Trying again, it's almost able to keep up, but not quite. Good thing I added speed controls. Well, it did make it to Aquilo, but when you are in orbit around any planet besides Navis, the asteroids that spawn are big enough to do damage to you. I didn't bring any extra building supplies to compensate, or repair packs, so if Carbano stays here, it's death by 1,000 cuts. I sent down all the carbon and sent it back to Navis. While the skinny platform is nice and fast, reliability is way more important if we want to use carbon for power. A much bigger platform would be a lot more reliable, but it feels like a huge waste for such a simple task. So back to the drawing board, where I'll take a page straight out of Apple's playbook. That's right, we're going to browse Facebook with a $4,000 computer. Building a second Rocket Man for this is like hitting the head of a nail with the Empire State Building as your hammer, but whatever, it just works. Aquilo froze again, so just like Chinese takeout, I'll reheat it for the 12th time. The carbon demands are getting pretty high though. It absolutely rips through it. Still filling in the ocean as well. From top to bottom, 1 handful at a time. But no time for that, Goku. We gotta save this doggone Navis. Without looking, can you guess what the shortage is? No, it's not purple science. We already fixed that. The iron patch dried up, so yet again, we need a new one. The closest one is over here to the west, but I'm not really in a mood for outposts, so time for a big old wall around it. Unfortunately for them, my bots thought it would be a good idea to charge at this roboport with no power in the middle of nowhere. Copper is also running out, but that's not nearly as urgent, so I'll just band-aid fix it with some big drills. After clearing out the center, in goes the miners. Stacked turbo belts. Although, these are quite expensive. If only there was a way to move lots of items long distances quickly. Wait a second. In goes the train loading station, and using the rail planner, I'll ghost the entire rail without having to tear anything down. It's a big day for spaghetti enthusiasts like me. Although the Automel is still complaining about steel. If only there was a way to make lots of steel quickly. Wait a second, I swear, foundries are the best building in Space Age by far. Not much later, in goes the final sheets of ice. Why do we need this much room? Time to pull the plug on platform production, which once again reminds me of how power-hungry bots are. Just for fun, I'll gamble for an epic nuclear backpack. Hopefully it won't take too long. Carbano 2 Electric Boogaloo is complete, which means it's time for our icy planet to become a carbon-based lifeless form. Imports go in the bottom west corner. Do we need this many cargo pods? No. Stacked carbon will get unloaded onto these 2 belts for heat, and a cryo plant to make ice for steam power. This one epic cryo plant makes 19 chemical plants worth of ice to melt, so in goes those, and needing to heat them makes the design a little strange. Solar to kickstart some water. Then in goes the heat exchangers, and a backup turbine on a regular boiler to hopefully keep everything running on low heat. Some towers for kickstarting, which quickly reaches the funding goal, then they'll be relocated above ice production to be our primary heat source. Since heating towers burn fuel even if they're already at maximum temperature, I'll wire the inserters to stop adding fuel once the tower hits 750 degrees. Carbano also got an emergency thrust system to make sure it keeps moving to spawn asteroids, since it's nearly impossible for it to kickstart itself once it's stationary. Even if it's completely out of ammo, it should be able to tank the damage. Now, I said that I was going to power everything off of just carbon. In fact, I've invested very heavily into it. But we've got a lot of excess ammonia from ice production, which we don't have a way to get rid of without processing it. So might as well turn it into rocket fuel. Ratios, smatios, but modules bring it to nearly 1-to-1. After defrosting oil production, solid and rocket fuel. I'll give it priority for the heating towers, but I'm betting we'll still primarily run off of carbon. Time to mass produce lithium. Unfortunately, there's no child labor on Aquilo, so we'll have to synthesize our organic whole grain lithium from scratch. Designing around heat pipes is slightly strange, but most of these setups end up exactly the same as the standard tiling designs I would build elsewhere. It does get tricky if you want to load items and fluids into the same side though. I never thought I'd build designs with beacons built in, but big empty gap in the middle. Might as well. Although heating them up did require a bit of belt shuffling. More power, just in case, and pumps for ammonia, which I'll need to separate the ice from first. But I'm out of cryoplants. One temporary setup later. In goes ice cubing. And I put a pump jack on the fluorine vent here to make sure I don't accidentally build over it. In goes the first lithium tile, and I don't have any use for the ice yet, so I'll recycle loop it. Another tile. And another. And another. I have no idea what the ratios for the science are. Building big is just fun. We need to pull the holmium plates out of the hub for lithium, but we're a bit space constrained down here, so I'll unload the cargo hub sushi style, using circuits to only unload each item as we need it, then filter it off with splitters. It's expandable too, just in case. With the lith loaded ineth, out comes the chunks and circularly smelted hunks. That's 2 out of 3 ingredients. Now we just need the cold fluoroketone. To make the cold fluoroketone, we need to cool down the hot ketone, and making the hot ket takes solid fuel, lithium, fluorine, and ammonia. Modules for ratios once again, 1 to 5. The solid fuel for that is shrimpple as well, and it'll go right next to the ice. Detour time! Fulgora supplies blue circuit deliveries for all of the other planets, which are still running behind the scenes as I research upgrades. But Fulgora isn't able to process scrap fast enough to keep up anymore. We're exporting all of the green circuits as well, which ends up starving blue circuit production. In goes more green circuits, which should help, but we'll have to check in again later. With oil hooked up, out comes solid fuel, which will go directly into ketamine production. Plugging everything in, and using fluorine for the first time, the ketosis comes out hot, then it's cold. After reclaiming the wasted ice from ammonia production, up goes all the resources, and a priority splitter to ensure ice doesn't clog. For the science, I was originally going to use productivity modules, but with how overbuilt the platform has become, I think it would be more fun to focus on making a bunch of quality science. 3 ingredients and a fluid input on the same side takes a bit of fang-dangling, but once it's tileable, onto the eastern right edge it goes. Hello.
Hey, it's me, Fulgora. We're still out of blue circuits.
I'll get right on that. Making them from scratch would take way too long. Luckily, Fulgora has a major bottleneck we can easily fix. The current recycling setup spits out onto the belts without any regards to stack size, which results in suboptimal output throughput thoroughly throughout, which I thought I ought to draw to not, thus I sought to write every clough in sight. Enough wordplay. Instead of outputting directly onto belts, we'll output all of the items into chests, then use some circuitry to only move items when a full stack is ready to be swung. Luckily, I already designed a circuit for this. This does have the density of the recyclers, but after making sure it works, we can deconstruct the entire upper accumulator field to cram in a lot more recycling. It's not fully built yet, but we've already doubled our recycling speed. The trains weren't able to keep up anymore either, so we've got to build bypasses to let the trains queue closer to the mine, which had to have its power upgraded as well. After finally plugging in the cold kerosene, we're making cryogenic science packs. And with so much headroom, I'll expand it all the way up to the top of the island. The heat pipes are having trouble reaching all the way up here though, but we can make the heating towers burn hotter to hopefully push it just a bit further. I'll double the science again for good measure, then crank up the towers to 900 degrees. Since there's extra solid fuel down here, I'll throw in a couple more heating towers just for good measure. Actually, might as well use all of it. It's no use just sitting on the belts. Sweet, sweet blue raspberry science packs. But that is just stage 1. Overbuilding so much science will let us waste a ton of it in an attempt to upgrade the quality level with recyclers. Speaking of quality, the backpack is finally ready, after Aquilo is almost done. Comedic timing at its finest. In goes quality stuffed recyclers, which I've set to recycle anything that isn't epic quality. After a lot of waiting later, that's 1. Okay, fine. Time to make it bigger. Yeah, this isn't gonna work, is it? Well, how about we just recycle everything of normal quality instead? The plants already make quite a bit of uncommon, so the losses shouldn't be too bad. Now to actually get the science out of here. I shipped in all of the silo materials forever ago, and after finally throwing them together, that's one sigh of low. We still need to unload low density structure and blue circuits from orbit, but I will make the rocket fuel on site. Plug it all in, wait a bit, then in go the logistics robots to load the rocket. I was right earlier about lithium brine being our bottleneck. I put in speed modules, but we're already making so much science that I won't worry about it too much. If need be, we can get more down here. Oh, and beacons too. We've nearly doubled the output. With Carbano set to deliver the science, bots start loading up a rocket of uncommon. But charging sure does slow it down. The science lifts off and buzzes off to Navis. We're currently making around 300 common science packs per minute. Not bad. With the bottles in the biolabs, time for our first research once we get a load of purple science from Vulcanus, which, yes, I know the steam from acid neutralization is the hotter turbine steam. I even went to go upgrade all of the boilers, but it was 4 in the morning and I didn't realize that the upgrade planner didn't do anything. First up, quantum processors, which unlocks the 2 researches that I actually care about. Red, green, and blue circuits. Are these pink or purple circuits? Next is fusion reactors, which are pretty darn expensive to build, but it'll finally let us move past the boiling water meta of power production. The power cells don't look too expensive either. Unlocking fusion also unlocks the final science pack, Promethium Science. Let her rip. Well, whenever Gleba is ready. With that researched, we unlock the Solar System Edge, which flying to is the end goal of Space Age. On the way to the edge, though, the asteroids go from large to huge. 99% explosion resistance, and whatever that number means on physical. How are you meant to break these? Looking at the research that Promethium Science unlocks, well, there's only one, Science Pack Productivity. For 1200 science, you permanently gain 10% research productivity. That seems oddly cheap. To make the science, however, we'll need biter eggs, quantum processors, and Promethium asteroid chunks. I've never seen those before. Well, chances are we won't be able to make it to the Solar System Edge with our current ship, but we can safely try it by moving into a parallel universe. 4 PU's over, Rocket Man isn't doing so hot. Those huge asteroids seem nigh impossible to destroy with rockets. Let's turn the ship around. Well, crap. If none of our guns work, that means it's time for a new gun. The railgun costs 2,000 science, and it's pretty expensive to build, although the ammo for it seems relatively straightforward, so we'll be able to make it on the platform. I'll start delivering the necessary supplies to Aquilo, then ship the rest of the cryogenic science packs back to Navis. Railgun. Looking at upgrades, railgun damage is 1,000 science and gives a whopping 40% damage upgrade. Definitely getting that. The research cost doubles every level, but that seems fair. I'll also queue a few levels of speed upgrades, which increases the fire rate by 20% per level. But that's going to take a while to research. So we'll have to save the railgun for next time. I'd like to take a moment to thank my supporters on Ko-fi. Y'all seem to like the post-credits discussion on Gleba, so I'll keep doing these. Aquilo was a lot easier than I was expecting it to be. I took a lot of silly detours to try to make it more entertaining, but if I had just focused on building the science and getting out of there, I would have probably only played for a couple of hours. The heating mechanic is interesting, but it's not nearly as difficult as I was expecting or hoping for it to be. I did have fun, but when I saw the science pack get researched so quickly into the planet, I was a little disappointed since I was expecting there to be at least a bit more depth. Maybe that depth will come when I automate the quantum processor, but at first glance, it just looks like I need to bring one resource from each planet, which won't be very hard. But I will need to make quite a few of them for Promethium science down the line, so maybe the difficulty of Aquilo comes from trying to scale up. Or on the other hand, maybe the difficulty spike I was expecting to get from Aquilo will be realized in my attempt to get to the Solar System Edge. But with how relatively cheap the first few damage upgrades are, maybe I'm overprepared. And if Promethium science is relatively easy to make in large quantities, reaching the edge shouldn't take very long. But I digress. Well, not really, I just wanted to say that. Anyway, that's all for today. My name's DocJade. Bye-bye.